Ethan always believed his marriage was steady and predictable. Everything changed the night Madison suddenly announced she would stay at her sister Rachel's place for a month and didn't want any contact. Her voice was calm, almost rehearsed, leaving Ethan with a knot in his stomach he couldn't explain. He tried to shake off the unease, telling himself she just needed space. But only a few days later, his world tilted. Social media exploded with photos of Madison at a beach resort, laughing in a bikini, holding a cocktail, and standing far too close to a man Ethan had never seen before. The captions were casual, but the intimacy in the pictures was unmistakable. And when Ethan called Rachel to check in, her confused reaction confirmed everything. Madison had never set foot in her house. In that moment, Ethan realized something deeper was happening, something far darker than a simple break. Ethan stared at the photos on his phone, each one striking him harder than the last. Madison wasn't just relaxing at a beach. She was leaning into a man, laughing with her hand on his shoulder, wearing the exact sundress she once said she bought just for date nights with Ethan. The man, tall, fit, and overly comfortable around her, kept appearing in every shot. The way he looked at her made Ethan's stomach twist. When he checked the comments, he finally caught the name, Connor. A coworker. Someone Madison had mentioned only once, in passing, like he was nothing more than a face in the office. Ethan woke up the next morning, with a clarity he hadn't felt in weeks. The shock was still there, buried under his ribs, but something colder had settled on top of it. Resolve. If Madison had already walked out of the marriage emotionally, then he would finish the part she didn't bother to do legally. He called a lawyer first. He explained the situation in a steady voice, the kind of calm that only comes when emotions have burned themselves out. The lawyer didn't sound surprised. Cases like this were common, he said. Ethan listened carefully, taking notes while the lawyer explained the process for separation, asset protection, and no-contact enforcement. When the call ended, Ethan already had a plan forming. The next step was practical. He contacted the bank. Madison's name was removed from every card he paid for. Her access to joint accounts was restricted. He felt a pang of guilt, but it disappeared when he remembered the image of her wearing another man's hoodie like it belonged to her. He wasn't taking revenge. He was reclaiming what she had walked away from. Then he tackled the phone bill. Madison's entire line existed only because Ethan had added her years ago, just to make life easier. Now, he ended it with one click. It was strange how quickly a piece of someone's independence could vanish when it wasn't truly theirs to begin with. He moved through the house next. Every photo of them together, every pair of her shoes, every piece of jewelry she left behind, he gathered them with quiet efficiency. He wasn't going to throw them away, but they no longer belonged in his home. So he rented a storage unit, labeled the bags with her name, and drove everything there by himself. The emptiness in the house felt unsettling at first, but it also felt honest. When the real estate agent arrived to evaluate the property, Ethan didn't hesitate. He explained he wanted to sell quickly. He didn't mention the heartbreak or the betrayal. He just said he was ready for a new start. The agent nodded, unaware of the storm that had led Ethan to this decision. By the afternoon, paperwork was already underway. Meanwhile, Madison posted more beach photos. More drinks. More smiles. Connor appeared in nearly every one. At first, Ethan had forced himself not to look, but the more he saw, the clearer he became. She wasn't coming back, not really. She had already checked out. He ate dinner alone that night at the empty kitchen island. The silence was heavy but peaceful. For the first time in a long while, he didn't question himself. He didn't wonder what he did wrong. He didn't rehearse an argument or a plea. He simply accepted the reality. Madison had made her choice, and now he was making his. Before going to bed, he added one last entry to his evidence folder. A photo Madison posted that day, laughing with Connor on a rooftop bar. He saved it without emotion. It was just another piece of the puzzle. Then he closed the laptop and whispered to himself, "This ends on my terms." And for the first time since the nightmare began, he finally felt like he was back in control. Madison first sensed something was wrong when her hotel tried to run her card for an extra night. The receptionist smiled politely and said the payment had been declined. Madison laughed it off, assuming it was a mistake, but when she tried again, the same error flashed across the screen. Her smile faltered. She stepped aside and opened her banking app, only to find her access restricted. Joint accounts were locked. Her cards no longer showed her name. For a moment, she stood frozen, the ocean breeze suddenly feeling sharp against her skin. She grabbed her phone to call Ethan, but the device displayed a message she had never seen before. "Service unavailable." She reset it, removed the SIM, tried the hotel Wi-Fi. Nothing. Her entire line was shut off. That was when panic began to creep up her spine. Connor noticed her packing. He asked what was wrong, but Madison brushed him off, saying she just needed to sort something out. She stepped outside, dialing Ethan again from a borrowed phone, yet every call went straight to voicemail. She tried texting him, emailing him, even messaging him on social media. Every attempt went unanswered. The silence was louder than any argument they had ever had. Later that afternoon, Rachel called. Her voice was sharp, unusually cold. She didn't ask how Madison was. She didn't ask about the trip. Instead, she went straight to the point, saying Ethan had contacted her and knew the truth. Madison tried to defend herself, claiming she needed space and clarity, but Rachel cut her off. "You lied to both of us," she said. "Do you have any idea what position you put me in?" The call ended abruptly, leaving Madison staring at her reflection in the hotel's glass door, suddenly hiding the carefree smile she saw there. Back in the room, she opened social media to distract herself, and that's when she realized Ethan had stopped viewing her stories. He had stopped seeing her posts. He had stopped engaging entirely. It was like he erased himself from her digital world overnight. She tried to laugh it off, trying to convince herself he was just upset and would cool down. But deep down, a sickening feeling settled in her chest. The next morning, Madison's boss emailed her asking why she had missed a scheduled virtual meeting she never mentioned to Connor. When Madison tried to reply, she realized she didn't have her company login. Her password had been reset. Her access was denied. Everything she relied on, money, communication, work, was slipping out of her hands. She stormed into the hotel bathroom, gripping the sink until her hands shook. She whispered to herself that it was fine, that she could fix it all. But the truth was unavoidable. Ethan was no longer the oblivious, patient husband she assumed he would always be. He had found out. And he had acted faster, smarter, and colder than she ever imagined he could. When she opened her phone one more time, she noticed a final notification, an automated email confirming the listing of their house for sale. In that moment, Madison realized this wasn't an argument. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the consequences she never thought she'd face. And Ethan was done waiting for her to come home. Madison arrived home earlier than planned, dragging her suitcase across the driveway with a tightness in her chest she tried to ignore. All she wanted was to get inside, confront Ethan, and put an end to the nightmare that had spiraled out of control. But when she slid her key into the lock, it didn't turn. She tried again, harder this time. Still stuck. Her heart thudded painfully as she jiggled the handle, pushed the door, even slammed her shoulder against it. Nothing moved. A cold realization hit her. The locks had been changed. Her own house, her home, no longer recognized her. She pulled out her phone, forgetting for a moment that the service was dead, and stared at the blank screen like it might suddenly rescue her. It didn't. Madison stepped back and called Connor with trembling hands. When he arrived, His expression mixed concern with irritation, clearly annoyed that her drama was beginning to spill into his life. She explained in rushed sentences that Ethan had overreacted and blocked her out, but Connor wasn't listening. He walked up to the door, tested the lock himself, then muttered that they could try the back. When that didn't work either, Madison felt her panic tip into desperation. She begged him to help her get inside, insisting she had clothes, documents, things she needed. Connor sighed, scanned the porch area, and finally said, "We can force it. No one's watching." But someone was. The neighbors across the street had been curious the moment they saw Madison return, dragging luggage and arguing loudly. And when Connor braced his shoulder against the door, one of them lifted their phone and hit record. Madison hissed at him to hurry, pushing him to try again. He rammed the door a second time, harder. Wood cracked. Madison's anxiety twisted into humiliation as she noticed curtains shifting in nearby houses. People were watching. Some even stepped outside. Connor tried a third time, louder than before, and that was when a voice shouted from down the street. "Step away from the door. Police are on the way." Madison froze. Connor backed up instantly. A patrol car pulled up within minutes, lights flashing but sirens off. 2 officers stepped out and approached them calmly but firmly. They asked for identification, then asked who lived in the home and why they were trying to break in. Madison launched into a frantic explanation that she lived there, that her husband had locked her out, that she was just trying to get her belongings. But the officers remained unmoved. One of them checked the house listing online. The property was officially up for sale. Ownership records showed Ethan as the sole legal owner. The officer explained that Madison could not enter without Ethan present, and that all of her things had been legally placed in a storage facility, already documented with timestamps and an inventory list. Madison felt her knees weaken. Connor stepped back farther, distancing himself as if she were radioactive. Neighbors whispered behind their fences. Phones kept recording. Her humiliation spread like wildfire through the street. The officers issued a warning. If Madison or Connor attempted to force entry again, they could be charged with attempted break-in. Madison could barely breathe as she nodded and stepped away. As the police drove off and the neighbors dispersed, Madison realized she had just crossed a line she could never uncross. This was no longer a private disaster. Her downfall had become a spectacle. And for the first time, she truly felt how completely she had lost control of everything around her. Madison spent the next morning sitting in her car outside a cafe, staring at her reflection in the dark screen of her useless phone. She felt untethered, like someone had cut every rope holding her life together. Determined to regain control, she contacted a lawyer using a borrowed phone and tried to demand her share of the house sale. She spoke boldly at first, claiming she had rights as a wife, but the attorney's response flattened her confidence instantly. The lawyer explained that by leaving the marital home voluntarily, without agreement, and by intentionally deceiving her spouse about her whereabouts, she had legally weakened her position. Abandonment of the household, combined with documented evidence of an affair, meant she had little ground to stand on. Madison sputtered, insisting the trip wasn't like that, but the lawyer remained unmoved. Her attempt to claim half the house collapsed in a matter of minutes. Frustrated and embarrassed, Madison turned to social media, the only platform where she still felt she had control. She posted a long message about betrayal, claiming Ethan had blindsided her, locked her out, stole her money, and left her stranded. For a moment, she felt empowered, imagining friends and coworkers rising to defend her. But the comment section took a turn she didn't expect. People asked why she was vacationing with another man. Screenshots of her beach photos leaked into her post. Someone mentioned seeing her stories, while she claimed to be staying with family. The more she tried to justify herself, the more followers pushed back, exposing inconsistencies. Within an hour, she stopped replying. Within 2 hours, she deleted the post entirely. But it was already too late. Her coworkers had seen everything. Her manager scheduled an immediate meeting, demanding an explanation for her conduct, her absence, and the inappropriate behavior that had surfaced online. When Madison tried to log into her company account to prepare for the meeting, she found her access locked again, this time intentionally. Her stomach dropped as she realized she wasn't being called in to clarify. She was being called in to face consequences. At the office, whispers followed her like a shadow. Several colleagues avoided eye contact. A few looked at her with thinly veiled judgment. Her manager confronted her with screenshots of her trip, including the image of her wearing Connor's hoodie. She tried to insist Connor was just a friend, but the evidence told a different story. Fraternizing with a superior, lying about her location, missing mandatory meetings, it all added up. The company suspended her pending disciplinary review. As she left the building, humiliated and shaking, her phone buzzed with a new message, this time an unknown number. When she opened it, her breath caught. It was from a woman she didn't know. Attached were photos of Connor with that woman. Dinners, trips, intimate poses taken long before Madison's beach getaway. The message was short and cutting. "He's been cheating on me with you for months. And it looks like he's cheating on you too." Madison felt the ground tilt beneath her. Connor hadn't just played her. He had used her, the same way he'd used someone else before. She remembered how he distanced himself during the police incident, how he refused to look at her afterward, how quickly he blamed her for everything. By the time she reached her car, her hands were shaking so violently she dropped her keys twice. She realized Ethan wasn't the only one who had walked away from her life. Connor had too. Her friends were gone. Her coworkers were done with her. Her family barely spoke to her. Every bridge she had stood on had crumbled. And now she stood alone in the wreckage, finally feeling the weight of every choice she had made. Madison spent the next few days drifting between hotels and friends, couches, trying to piece together what remained of her life. Her job was on hold. Her reputation was shattered. Her relationship with Connor had imploded before she even understood what it truly was. Each morning she woke up hoping something, anything, would shift back in her favor, but every day only revealed more fallout from her choices. She tried calling Ethan again using different numbers, but he never answered. Emails bounced back with automated replies, stating he was unreachable during a legal process. It didn't feel real to her. Even at their worst, Ethan had always been the calm one, the forgiving one, the man who picked up the pieces when she lost control. Only now did it hit her that he wasn't doing that anymore. He had stopped softening her consequences. He had stopped giving her second chances. With nowhere else to turn, Madison drove to the storage facility where Ethan had placed her belongings. Seeing her life condensed into labeled boxes sent a sharp ache through her chest. Clothes, photos, shoes, documents, all packed neatly, almost respectfully. Ethan hadn't thrown anything out. He hadn't destroyed her things. He simply removed her from his world. Her hands shook as she opened one box after another, realizing this was what the end of a marriage looked like when the other person had finally reached their limit. Desperation pushed her into a final, reckless idea. She decided to confront Ethan in person, convinced that if he just saw her cry, if he just heard her voice shake, if he just remembered what they used to be, maybe, just maybe, he would show mercy. She rehearsed her lines the entire drive to his temporary rental. She practiced softening her voice, letting tears fall, twisting her guilt into something that looked like vulnerability. She needed him back. Not out of love, but out of survival. When Ethan opened the door, the shock on his face quickly hardened into something unreadable. Madison launched into her speech, claiming she had made mistakes, that she had been confused, that Connor had manipulated her, that the beach trip meant nothing. Ethan didn't interrupt. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply watched her with a calm she couldn't interpret. Her panic rose, so she pulled out the final card she thought might sway him. She whispered that she might be pregnant. For a moment, there was silence. But Ethan only tilted his head slightly and asked one simple question about dates and timelines. The math exposed her lie instantly. Madison's face crumpled. Her last attempt to regain control dissolved in front of her. Then Ethan delivered the sentence she would never forget. "You wanted distance," he said quietly. "So I gave you an entire world of it." He stepped back and closed the door. No shouting. No anger. Just finality. Later that week, she learned Connor had quit their workplace entirely and blocked her on everything. The company officially terminated her position. Her parents refused to defend her to extended family. Messages from former friends went unread because she couldn't bear to see their judgment. She sat alone in her car, engine off, surrounded by silence thick enough to feel like fog. The life she once had, marriage, career, stability, admiration, had collapsed in on itself, leaving nothing but consequences she had never imagined would belong to her. Madison finally understood that the distance she wanted wasn't freedom. It was the beginning of losing everything she never realized she depended on. Weeks later, Madison found herself living in a small rented room on the edge of the city, the kind of place she once would have mocked. She spent her days sending out resumes, waiting for replies that never came, and scrolling through photos of a life that no longer belonged to her. The silence around her felt heavier than any confrontation she had ever feared. One evening, she walked past a cafe and saw Ethan inside, laughing with two friends. He looked lighter, calmer, almost renewed. She froze on the sidewalk, realizing that he had healed in ways she could no longer reach. For the first time, she understood that some people don't come back, not even when you finally want them to. She continued walking, her steps slow but steady. There was no dramatic breakdown, no final plea, no sudden redemption. Just acceptance, quiet, unwelcome, but real. That night, she sat on her narrow bed and opened a blank notebook. She wrote one sentence, the first honest thing she had admitted to herself in months. "I lost everything because I thought nothing could ever truly break." She closed the notebook gently. It wasn't hope, not yet. But it was the beginning of finally facing her own reflection without looking away.